So, Superman and Lois, Season 3, Episode 3, they keep hitting me in the feels. They keep doing it. They keep doing it, and I think we all know that this season's going to be consistently moving us with this storyline that Lois is going through, and it's a very, very tough one. But this episode was tough, I feel like, on all fronts, such as the Lana Lang stuff. Like, did anyone see that coming? We have Intergang kind of smoothly going along. I wouldn't say like major things happen this episode. It's kind of cooking up stuff in the background while we address the fallout from Lois at the end of last episode, Superman learning that, and of course the family learning that. So guys, if you enjoyed this video or go on to enjoy it, I would really appreciate a like. Of course, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below with regards to this episode, and of course any theories that you have as well. But I really, I don't know about you guys, liked the beginning of this episode. I know it was a nightmare, so it wasn't real, but it looked pretty damn awesome seeing Superman fly through Metropolis like that, more and more just trying to attempt to save Lois. But the more he kept trying to do it, the more he had this inability to even do it, which is of course, you know, him being Superman, him being all powerful, being able to save people from landslides, God knows what. He can't save his wife from cancer. This is a battle that Lois must do alone. And I like how in this episode, I don't know if you noticed, but when in that first nightmare we saw him strive towards Lois, he actually managed to save her, I believe, just in the nick of time. But when we saw Lois miss her appointment and he had another nightmare, he tried to make it to her, but he didn't quite get there in time, and she died underneath the rubble. So as this episode unfolds with Lois and her whole storyline of kind of avoiding the chemotherapy and everything going on with that, the more his concerns and pressure of wanting to save Lois, or, you know, just Lois trying to get better, is getting farther and farther away. So I thought that was a nice touch. I honestly haven't been this emotional in a long time. It feels like watching a show. Maybe I'm lying to myself. It's probably happened in Doom Patrol or something, but the beginning of this episode with Lois ringing up her sister Lucy, the Langs, then Chrissy, and then meeting John Henry Irons, and then her father, Sam Lane. My God, like when we got to the Sam Lane part, oh man, like I can't do it. I can't do it, mate. I can't do it. I thought, just like the previous episode with the somewhat montage at the beginning, here again, it was very well done, very heartbreaking, as it would be. And this show reflects, or is at least trying to tackle this really tough storyline. And I know people are concerned, you know, if they're going to handle it well. But so far, I feel like, especially with this being a family-driven show, showing the stresses of whether that's just Clark being Superman, to that of the Langs, you know, in the neighborhood, her being a mayor, and the stresses that puts on Sarah and Kyle, and what's going on with that divorce, reflecting their family situation, which people can relate to then something as serious as this. I feel like the show really knocks it out the park with trying to represent all these kind of situations to the best of their ability. Now with Lois, of course, she is a journalist and she's on the Bruno Manheim case and really trying to expose what's going on there in the Smallville Gazette with Chrissy, and this is a huge thing for her, because one thing that's emphasized this episode is that this could be like the story of a lifetime, trying to uncover what he's trying to sweep away this episode. And so they get a name of a doctor who signed off on these patient releases, such as Henry Miller, Ataman, who got friggin' pumped full of Superman's blood, and we need to talk about what the heck could be going on there a little bit later. So they're pursuing that, and that is obviously very palpable to Lois, but also at the same time, while she really wants to pursue this, we all know it's a mega distraction from her having to face this absolute tidal wave coming her way. But let's put a little pause in that, and up next in my notes, I say, meanwhile with the Langs. So we have John Henry Irons set up security at their house, given everything that's going on with her and the mayor in the previous episode. We didn't really get so much of a development with that this episode. It's more on the back burner with that thumb drive that Onomatopoeia took away. I'm sure we'll get into that maybe next episode or shortly after. But there's clear signals going on here, even within the dialogue, with regards to, oh, you need to set it up for Kyle, and this is just me paraphrasing. She's like, no, not Kyle. And then Lana says to John Henry, saying, oh, it must be so hard for you with everything Lois is going through. And he's just like, you know, I feel for her, but she's not my wife. So they're both kind of making it clear that even though Lois isn't really John Henry Irons' in the first place, but obviously was his wife on his Earth. But either way, that both respective other people aren't a part of their lives anymore, and it's just like, you know, more or less, they're on the table for each other. If you want to pursue that, Lana, or if you want to pursue that, John. But this gets a little bit more complicated as the episode unfolds, because we have Sarah tell Kyle about the security, and he's like, well, what the heck? People were making money out of you. That's probably what's happening. And she's just like, no, John Henry did it. He's like, John Henry. Now, I don't think Kyle really particularly cares, because I think he's moving on just as much as Lana is. It's just, I think there is that inbuilt curiosity as to her cracking on, just kind of like he is cracking on as well with Chrissy. Either way, curiosity gets the better of him. He goes to the mayor's office, gives Lana a coffee, starts asking about the situation, and she completely bites his head off. Now, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, because in one way, I do see Lana, and she was on quite a steamroll this episode, especially with what we're about to talk about. I do see how you can kind of be annoyed if your, like, now somewhat divorced husband is poking around in your life and you're trying to move on from that, and, you know, inadvertently asking different questions to try and get to the meat of, okay, so what's going on with you and John? So she bites his head off there, but it did feel like a little bit of an reaction. But to be honest, this is what I mean about Superman and Lois. I do feel like this emulates, not that I am divorced myself, in fact I'm engaged, but I do, you know, let's not pretend that divorced couples don't, you know, often act like this to each other, because they can. So either way, Lana later on storms into the kitchen, bites Sarah's head off, and Sarah kind of makes a good point here. She starts even piping up to her herself, and, you know, borderline probably crosses the line a little bit with, you know, showing respect to your parents, but I think we've all been there where you're just like, right, this is going to get a bit rude on my half as well, because you're kind of being rude to me. You're making this into a situation that you don't need to, so you know what? You know, and she gets slapped because of it. And this was kind of out of nowhere. I do wonder if people are just going to be like, once again, don't really care about the Lang family drama, but I do have to, you know, think about how this does represent, you know, some family situations. Now, I'm not saying remotely, by the way, that it's obviously not okay for what Lana did to Sarah. That is completely out of order. But once again, it's showing a family dynamic where, you know, Lana thinks she's in the right. She's coming in. She's the parental authority figure, having a go at Sarah, bossing her around, and Sarah's got her own perspectives on this. So while people may not care so much about this storyline, I do feel like, given that they're characters in the show, they are exploring relevant, somewhat family drama. And it's going to be interesting, though, to see what Kyle thinks of this, because obviously Sarah came in at the end where him and Chrissy were getting a bit of chemistry on once again. And, you know, he's got to learn that Lana literally put hands on her daughter and his daughter as well. So it's just, I don't know if that's going to create even more of a separation between Kyle and Lana. Like, I hope it doesn't get as dramatic as Sarah's going to live with her dad. Going back to the Lois story, we have Clark at chemotherapy. Lois hasn't turned up. And I do feel really bad for Clark at this episode, because once again, to just give credit to the show here, I do feel like it's showing a good job of what it would be like to be in his position as well. Obviously, Lois is going through it. She can do whatever she wants. She's going through it at her own pace, and there's reasons behind this. I'm not going to preach about this, but it's obviously not easy to remotely commit to something like this, even if it does mean that it can treat you. But as the partner, I can only imagine how painful and concerning that is. Again, going back to the nightmare. Meanwhile, Chrissy and Lois go into that abandoned medical building after the doctor. Chrissy finds out that Lois missed her appointment and has a go at her. And speaking of having a go, we have Sam Lane have a go at Clark as well. He's just like, you let Lois miss chemo for an investigation? He's like, well, I didn't let her do anything. So again, I do feel like this show is showing the stress that this can put on other family members who are so concerned about that one person. I mean, sure, if you want to look at it at the most logical level, you can say or call Sam Lane out for being like, why are you having a go at Clark? But given the situation of everything, you can kind of understand how fearful he is and how he almost does see Clark as responsible for, you know, but how could you let that happen? And I do feel for all characters, even if they are acting a bit out of line sometimes. So after a scene of Lois and Clark kind of talking about that whole situation, they go to chemo again the next day, but Superman being Superman, you know, lives are at stake, and he hears a landslide and he goes off. And we get like some scenes of Lois in the waiting room, and I can only imagine how this would feel. She's feeling nervous, and they show a few examples of that, and she's kind of looking for any excuse to kind of, and there is some legitimacy in terms of how big this case is. As she said herself, this is a story of the lifetime, but there is extra context there with how long Lois and Clark have actually personally tried to get Bruno Manheim years and years ago. So that is like weighing up to obviously the bigger priority, and that is chemo, but then there's obviously the underlying story of her being a bit scared to really start feeling the effects of how that might waste away at who she is. So she suspects Chrissy isn't telling her everything and jumps at the chance to find her and goes to where Chrissy is, and Chrissy's basically found the location where there's a bunch of Bruno Mannheim's men. They're armed and they're packing things away, and Lois is just like, well, we can go in there and see some things that they've left behind. Very Lois Lane, going in there in the face of danger, but Chrissy finds out that she's missed another appointment, so this storyline just keeps going and going, and everyone's getting a bit mad at Lois for not prioritizing her health. When they enter the building, they hear the guys, so they go in the back of a room with a bunch of blood bags, and we find out whose blood that is later, and we'll talk about that. And they get stuck in there. Not even the Superman alarm will work, and that's because Bruno Mannheim is, you know, definitely prepared for situations like that. Now Clark in Superman mode is obviously freaking out because she's gone missing, goes to the DOD, tells Sam Lane, and I'd be pretty nervous myself because with the way everyone is feeling and under the pressure and stress they are with Lois's health, he has another go at him, and so now the race is on to find Lois. But again, let's take a break from this and talk about what the kids are up to this episode. Now, it feels like this season, especially after the previous episode, that they have like these side stories that are meant to complement the episode. Now, I definitely enjoyed this one a lot more than the party one last episode. Initially, Natalie comes up with the idea of giving Lois a gift to kind of just show that support for her, and it's actually the watch that her mother, her other Lois, wore, and she tells John Henry Irons about that, but he initially wasn't too, you know, fond of that idea, even though he comes round at the end of the episode. John is in a bit of a hurdle because he hasn't told his girlfriend Candace that his ex-girlfriend last episode, tried to kiss him. It seems like as though towards the very end of the episode he was about to tell her that, and I wonder how she'll react because they didn't show the scene. I'm guessing she maybe might let it pass, maybe not. Because she did feel very guilty about all the trouble she's caused him, the XK being suspended from football, now Dad stealing the freaking truck. So I'm not sure that makes it even or anything, but yeah, I don't know how you all are invested in John's relationship here. But the main plot with these guys this episode outside the watch was that when he dropped off Candace, her dad was being like a proper creep, like, nah, John. It's just like, okay. And then the next day at school, the truck has gone missing, and lo and behold, the watch was in the glove compartment box in the truck, so they're like, yeah, we need to get this back. And so this led to a scene in where essentially Natalie locates the stolen truck because they basically all knew, it's definitely Candace's dad. And this led to a pretty cool action scene. I know Jordan has to be careful, especially with how strict Clark is, for good reason, to not reveal his identity. Also, just the fact that he's super powerful and could kill someone just through his mere inexperience. But yeah, just with Jonathan going through, holding his breath because of a little smoke grenade, racing his way to the car, and you see Natalie swoop in, Jordan do his Superboy stuff. That was all actually quite pleasantly surprising. I didn't know this would amount to that. I thought they would just kind of locate the truck and just steal it, but not necessarily with this level of action. It makes me wonder what more we could get with this kind of power trio of Jonathan, Natalie, and Superboy Jordan, and also what this will mean for the father in future episodes, because the promo does tease like more shadiness with Candace's dad, so I don't know where that's gonna go. I'm not like proper invested in that, because like what's he really gonna do? But you do see Lois saying stay away from my family and stuff, so maybe this is just gonna be like a big thing for Jonathan moving forward. But anyway, back with Lois and Chrissy locked in the room, the guys open it up and they're like, Lois Lane, and then point a gun to her, but because the door is open, they can launch the Superman alarm. Clark hears it, races in, they get to safety, but the thing is, they seem to have some kind of intergang weaponry, seem to have kind of like two little frickin' hand cannon pulse guns that absolutely zaps Superman. Now, I believe, if I remember correctly, did it have like a green glow to it? Now, I'm not saying it's like fueled with kryptonite, but it's clearly fueled with something that can harm him. And if it wasn't for John Henry Irons' steel coming in and, you know, Sam Lane saying, well, his vitals are basically tanking. If you don't get there now, he's basically gonna die. Then Superman could have been in a whole bunch of trouble. And I don't know how much I like that. Because, you know, I know Superman's weak to magic and kryptonite, but maybe we need to find some more stuff out about this weaponry. And it gives, like, other characters like John Henry Irons' steel, like, a relevant moment. But does that actually mean that Superman would have died if it wasn't for John Henry Irons in that moment? But we're still yet to realize the full potential of this Bruno Manheim threat, this weaponry, perhaps related to Intergang weaponry, which is like an inherent thing with Intergang in the comics. So in one moment, it seems like all of that stuff that Lois did, you know, not prioritizing her health for this story was for nothing, but it turns out that Sam Lane rang up and said, due to the blood that Lois found the other day and that she sent in, they've got a match, and that is Superman's blood. And that is certainly very, very interesting. And I totally forgot to mention, obviously, we had that scene between Lois and Clark, which was another fantastic scene. Elizabeth Tulloch is amazing. Just very quickly, her talking about, you know, not wanting to feel fragile, not ready to kind of go down that route of what chemo can do to you. I don't really have too many more words than just saying, I love Elizabeth Tulloch, and her scenes with Tyler Hoechlin's Clark are just, you know, and again, as soon as she starts tearing up, I'm just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. But yeah, what's going on with Superman's blood? How did they actually get Superman's blood? I suppose they're gonna, you know, cut back to a time where Superman was depowered and they managed to get it, or maybe they stole it for just in case, you know, when Superman's in danger and depowered, they can actually give him a blood transfusion at the DOD or something. Maybe there's just something like that and somehow they managed to get access to it. But we realized that's what Henry Miller, Atom Man, was being pumped with. And that's how we got his superpowers to even take on Clark in that episode. Now, we do cut to a scene with Henry Miller in somewhat of a freaking Bacta tank. I don't know. They say that they've pushed him as far as he can go, but Manheim wants him alive, so, you know, find someone else you can push further, but they're clearly keeping him reserved for something. Like, if he wasn't significant, you would have thought that Henry Miller would just be gone now. Like, I'm pretty sure he flatlined at the end of last episode, but here he is again being kept on. So even though they're going to find someone else, and maybe there's going to be another kind of superpowered-esque Henry Miller type person out there that Superman goes up against, they've obviously got more planned for him, despite saying they've pushed him as far as they can. Now, there are some spoilers out there, I believe. I think Canada Graphs has kind of got quite a scoop on what they could be building up to, which is so interesting. And I don't want to talk about it here for spoiler reasons, but let's just say they're creating something which is certainly interesting. And that was obvious anyway. Like, Bruno Mannheim's trying to create something here, and he's like, we're close. But I would love to know what you guys think that is. If you do know what it is, do be mindful of others and use spoiler tags in your comment. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they get to that. Not to mention, how is Lex Luthor involved in all of this? But end of the episode, we have Lois finally ready to go to her chemotherapy. Natalie gives her the watch that she made for Lois. They got it back after all. And, you know, they keep hyping up this kinetic energy that it shares with John Henry Irons' steel hammer. I really hope that doesn't have some like really weird twist to it. And that, you know, basically is the end of the episode. Lois is ready now, and you can obviously guess that in the episodes to come, she's going to be feeling a lot weaker, and, you know, it's going to be interesting to see if she's still very perseverant in trying to follow this Bruno Mannheim story, but not necessarily being able to physically do that, because obviously chemo will completely take it out of her, and the promo for next episode teases a little bit of this. So all in all, I enjoyed this episode. Like, major stuff didn't necessarily go down. I mean, we had Lois and Chrissy pursue that storyline, but didn't really amount to much other than the revelation of Superman's blood. So I suppose that is something quite big. I think what this episode has going for it, and the subsequent episodes, if ever there's a storyline that doesn't give us a major, you know, dose of main plot with Bruno Mannheim, Lex Luthor, and God knows what else, is that we've got a very serious storyline that lends to like fantastic performances and a lot of, you know, emotion that you can get out of the audience there naturally, given how delicate this story is. I do think next episode we need to get like another major oomph with regards to whatever Bruno Mannheim is cooking up. Again, last episode in my review I expressed, you know, a bit of concern with, are they just kind of creating powered individuals again, you know, similar to XK. And, you know, sure, we've got Superman's blood in that reveal, but are they still just creating people like that? I mean, I have an idea of where they might be getting at the end goal because of some leaks, but, you know, I hope we get some kind of big factor with this storyline soon. Not saying that it's dragging behind or anything like that, but I do feel like it might if they don't ramp it up in the next couple of episodes. Maybe Lex Luthor coming in could give it a really big boost as well, but I'm still like really enjoying the Bruno Manheim stuff and Onomatopoeia, and it's just, it took a little bit of a backseat this episode, but given everything else that we got to, that's fine. I just wouldn't want that, you know, for 2 or 3 episodes in a row. But yeah, just let me know your thoughts on this episode, guys. What was your, you know, most interesting part, your favorite part? Do you have any theories for where things are gonna go? Have you heard that leak? If you have, again, let me know, but just do use spoiler tags for those who don't want to know about it. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a like. Maybe consider subscribing if you want to stay up to date with breakdowns like this on Superman and Lois. Check out my previous video. We talked about the Batman 2's reported villain, and that is Clayface, so I ramble about that quite a bit. But I'm gonna love you and leave you now, guys. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.